Hey everybody, Matt Colville here. We played D&D last night. This is the campaign diary where I relay to you the narrative of what happened last night. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about how I think things went and what, if any, DM lessons can be learned from the session. When last we left our heroes, the characters are about to assault the Temple of Anti-Sanity, which is a Darrow temple built on the Island of Madness. They erected it to their insane god, one of the old ones. The old ones in my campaign are Aboleths, but Aboleths in D&D 5 are only about 10th level, to CR 10. I think, and I've built the Aboleth up to be quite a bit nastier. So I think my Aboleth are probably like CR 15 or something like that. The battle starts with King, a Zeal cleric and the commander of the chain, from outside the temple, lobbing a fireball inside the temple. He does 48 points of damage to the 4 guards that are inside. And these guards are meant to be pretty beefy. They have a high armor class, but I only gave them about 56 hit points. I probably should have given them more hit points. 48 points of damage if you fail your save is quite a lot. But in spite of that, the battle wasn't super one-sided. These guards, each of these 4 guards, they're halberdiers. They each have an ability to kind of go into an insane fury and halberd everybody within like a 10-foot square in front of them. And having all 4 guards, once the players, like 3 or 4 of them entered the temple to get line of sight on the enemy priest and the enemy wizard, once they did that, the guards were able to use their halberd abilities on all, 4 of the PCs at once. And so that was, they were able to give as good as they got. That was pretty cool. Darrow in 5th edition are not incredibly nasty creatures, but neither are humans. Humans, a regular everyday human peasant is no great threat. So just as we can see in the player's handbook that there are heroic dwarves and heroic humans and heroic elves, we can also assume that when we look at the Darrow in the monster manual, that there can be much nastier Darrow than these. And that's what the players are fighting. I grabbed a lot of abilities from 4th edition and gave them a lot of Darrow abilities from 4th edition, gave them to these guys, which is a lot of fun for me. I love 4th edition because I just think the monster design in 4th edition is more engaging and more fun to run. I think the flip side is, and the reason they ditched a lot of that stuff, is it makes the game more tactical, but also I think it might make the monsters harder and more complex to run, but I'm used to that logic. So for me, it's pretty straightforward for me to run these guys. I'm not necessarily sure a new DM would like it. I think that's down to taste. So like that halberding everybody in a 10-foot square, that's right out of 4th edition. They also have the ability to automatically save once per encounter on any ability that requires a intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw. And this is down to the fact that they're mad. They're little bundles of insanity. And so it's hard to get a grip on their brain with your spells. Inside the temple, inside this large room, there on the floor, there's this glyph. It's 40 feet on a side. And the players, thanks to Leech, who's their warlock, Leech knows, he made his arcana check, that it's a symbol of insanity. And they can see that there's a gong next to the altar. The altar is just this giant pool. It's like a huge tub of water. Next to it is a gong. And the players, they don't know what the gong does, but they know they don't want the gong to go off. And at least one of the players, Tom, has guessed correctly that if the gong goes off, the symbol of insanity will fire. And symbol of insanity is a 7th level spell that is going to wreck this party. So the first thing Judge does on Judge's turn is he goes in and he casts silence on an area that includes most of the room, but also like the enemy spellcasters and the gong. And that was very effective. That silence stayed up in spite of my attempts to hurt Judge and make it so that Judge had to make a concentration check, including a little trick I threw at him. Judge was able to maintain concentration throughout the entire battle, and they never rang the gong, which is good for them because go look up Symbol of Insanity. It's not good. The wizard Darrow and the priest Darrow throw a lot of cool abilities and spells at the players, including they try to banish the heroes, and they only succeed in banishing Big Cat. The wizard Darrow, who is like all Darrow insane, has a one ability that you can use once per encounter. It's like a mind fire ability. It's a psionic blast, targets it at Judge, and Judge takes a whole bunch of mental damage, but also it messes with your head, and it's going to have an ongoing effect. And this is something that I don't remember seeing in 4th edition before. I found it when I was looking up how did Darrow in 4th edition work. They're in the 4th edition Monster Manual 3. But the thing I liked was it's up to the player how they want to shake it off. They can either take ongoing damage until they save, or they can choose to be dazed, which is an effect from 4th edition that's not in 5th edition, and I've avoided using it in 5th edition up until now, but I really like Dazed. I think Dazed is a straightforward, easy way to debuff the heroes without completely nerfing them, so they still get to do something, but it's temporary. So Judge can either sit there and shake off this headache, that is persistent, and that means he's dazed for one round. He can either act or move, but not both. He can still take bonus actions, Or, and this was something that I had decided well before. This is just in the abilities, well before I ever knew what Judge and those guys were going to do. He can just decide to end a concentration spell. All of these, it seemed to me, perfectly consistent with the idea of trying to clear your mind of this mental anguish. So Judge decides to be dazed, which was, so that whole sequence I thought was pretty neat. The Darrow Wizard casts Fireball on the heroes and kills one of his own guards, because of course he would, they're insane. And that was neat, trading fireballs back and forth and doing a lot of damage to the heroes. And then the enemy priest puts Crown of Madness on Slim. Slim fails his saving throw and is going to attack Judge. Everybody can tell this is one of those things where it was tactically not probably the best thing for the priest to do, and I knew that, but I also thought I think the priest would do this anyway because it was going to be so many rounds, so many characters' actions between casting Crown of Madness and Slim getting to go that Judge was going to have plenty of opportunity to get away from Slim, or the other heroes are going to get the chance to disrupt the concentration, and in fact they did so. Once it seemed as though the heroes were very clearly going to win, that's when I had a Darrow mutant crawl out of the altar, which is a large pool of glowing water, and the Darrow mutant his body is pulsing and mutating and changing, and he lashes out at Boots. He goes to punch Boots, and his arm explodes into tentacles and they wrap around Boots. He's grappled, and not only is he grappled, he is now beginning to suffocate, he is blind, and he is deaf because the tentacles they're wrapping around his head, they're going into his nose and ears and mouth and stuff like that. And that again is an effect from 4th edition from the Darrow. I wanted the mutant to try to drag one of the players into the water just to see what would happen, but we never really got to the point. They were able to make their grapple checks to escape the grapple before the Darrow mutant could go again. So that was a missed opportunity. The biggest missed opportunity, and this is mixing some of the after action commentary with the story, the biggest problem with this whole encounter is that I had set it up so that the insane priest could use the concordance rules from Strongholds and Followers and summon Korsoth Vastican, which is he's a member of the Court of All Flesh, a group of beings of pure chaos, not good or evil, just chaotic. And Korsoth Vastican is one of the lower level members of the court, and he has this amazing, he's an archer, he gets 4 shots per round. If you are hit by 3 of those shots in one round, you have to make a saving throw. If you fail your saving throw, you have to roll on the reincarnation table. His ability is called Form Killer, and it kind of fits with all of the Court of All Flesh's changing forms and changing shapes and being chaotic beings. And I thought that would be really cool. The effect only lasts, I think, for an hour or something like that. But the players don't know that. It would have been pretty epic. And I completely forgot. I obviously was not on my game last night. I was so busy running the guards and the mutant and the priest and the wizard, and I think being relatively effective with them. Each, the wizard and the priest, if you look at their ability, they have tons of spells. They're high-level spellcasters, and in one case, they had 4th level spells. They had 2 different 4th level spells. But the problem with all of this is, and one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of using spells for enemies like this is, I think they had a total of 15 spell slots, and maybe they knew, 12 or 16 spells or something, and they cast 2 or 3 of them, right? So that notion of here, because if you like that kind of thing, oh, look at all these options I have. Yeah, but how many of these 1st and 2nd level spells are going to be actually useful in a combat that goes at most 5 rounds? I intended this battle to be the major battle of the evening, and I think it basically was, and it was a lot of fun, I thought. The players did a great job coordinating. They're starting to coordinate their attacks and abilities and figure out how they all work together. Things went pretty smoothly. We've left that period behind us where the players just spend a long time, especially players playing new classes or new players playing existing classes, trying to figure out how their stuff works. We did have one major shift, which I maybe have buried the lead on, which is that Tom Schmuck has changed his character's class. He's still playing Boots, but he no longer is this weird hybrid of a duelist and a swashbuckler that we kind of cobbled together. He's just playing a completely straightforward College of Swords bard. And we had lunch yesterday before the game, and he said, hey, so here's the thing, we're trying to get this class to work the way I want. And somebody on Twitter was like, you should just play a College of Swords bard. I'm like, what's that? And he went and looked at it and he goes, oh, this is exactly what I want. I've been wrestling to try to get this homebrew class to behave the way I want. But really, I think all I want is to play a College of Swords bard. I'd be a lot happier. I'm like, go for it. Makes perfect sense to me. I told him, I said, I consider your character sheet to be an imperfect translation of your character into the rules of D&D. So anytime you feel like this isn't working, let's tweak it, let's change it, by all means, go right ahead. And I think that, Tom he had this, he was kind of the possibilities of D&D, the fact that you can do anything and the fact that you can just throw these things together made him feel like, oh, I can just grab bits from this class and that class. And I'm pretty permissive when it comes to that kind of thing, because I don't really think at the end of the day, I think that the major problem isn't with class balance or anything like that. It's mostly with players overloading themselves with weird homebrews that they maybe don't understand that well. That's, I think, the biggest problem. And so for me, Tom's saying, I just want to be a bard. I want to be this official Wizards of the Coast subclass. I was like, great, go for it. And it was immediately obvious that Tom was happier playing this bard. His abilities were more straightforward. They worked the way he wanted to. He enjoyed role-playing, giving people inspiration, and he did healing word and stuff. And in every instance, he gave it a little narrative flourish, which I liked. So yeah, Tom is playing Boots, the College of Swords bard right now. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a retcon. We'll probably do a whole Running the Game episode on retconning and my attitude toward it and when I've used it and when I've not used it. But yeah, so now it's not like anything has changed with Boots in the world. The idea is he's always been this. They kill the mutant, they finish off the other Darrow, and now they're alone in the Temple of Anti-Sanity. They dismantle the gong. They throw the mallet out so that it cannot be rung because they don't want someone to come in behind them and ring it. And then there's just a question of what to do next. This temple is literally one room. It's built over the inverted tower, which is the home of the mad old one. And now it's up to the players to figure out, what do we do? Well, there wasn't anything else to do except the altar, the pool, the large rectangular pool at the top. They look in the pool, it's glowing. They can't really see the bottom. And I describe it as because it's illuminated, because light's coming out of it, it's difficult to see all the way to the bottom. And they start asking, is it like a tunnel going down? And they don't have a blueprint of it or anything. Leech has Odie, his imp familiar, taste the water to see if there's anything strange about it. It doesn't have any effect on Odie. He just doesn't like the taste of it. And then Leech takes the opportunity to explain to the other characters, this is probably the entrance to the tower. Once we go in here, we are entering the Old One's world. We're entering the Old One's realm, and we're gonna have to play by his rules. He's mad, he's insane, he likes to play games, he likes illusions, he likes tricks, he likes trying to drive people mad with unsolvable puzzles. And once we go in here, we have to play by his rules. The player's like, well, we don't really seem to have a choice, correct? And Judge, they're debating who's going to go in. King orders Leech in and says, come on, we're going to jump in together. And while they're arguing, Judge just goes, I jump in, and then all the other players follow. Now we get to the part of the adventure I was really looking forward to. Judge jumps in the pool, and Judge finds himself transported, still wet, covered in water, dripping, leaving a pool on the floor, but finds himself in a maze with mother of pearl walls and floor and ceiling softly glowing. The corridors of the maze are 5 feet wide. Judge explores the maze. It's very small. And no matter which way you go, you're either going to run into a dead end or the wall of the room the maze is in, or you're going to be spat out into the middle. And in the middle of the room, at the end of the maze, where all of the different pathways in the maze all converge, is a 15 by 15 area with an obelisk in the middle of it. And this obelisk has 3 sides. There are writing on 2 sides, and one side is blank. The other characters jump into the water, and they all show up in this same place, and they all arrive in the middle of the maze. The maze was not challenged. It wasn't something to be navigated. It's mostly decorative. And they look at this obelisk, and the obelisk has, I said, writing on 2 sides. And so once all of the characters are standing around the obelisk, I read the writing to them. Lifeless, life's perfect form I wear. Can show a nose, eye, tongue, or ear. Yet neither smell, see, taste, or hear. All shapes and features I can boast. No flesh, no bones, no blood, no ghost. All colors without paint put on and change like the chameleon. Now, as soon as I said this, Anna went, mirror. Anna had been listening and thought about it, and either Anna had encountered this poem in real life because it is a poem from the real world. It is a puzzle, a riddle from the real world, or she just figured it out. But Anna said that. She didn't say that Judge said it. And the player's like, well, what does the text on the other side say? All things on earth I imitate, faster than nature can create. Sometimes imperial robes I wear, anon in beggar's robes appear. A giant now, and straight an elf. I'm every one, but ne'er myself. Ne'er say I mourn, ne'er glad rejoice. I move my lips, but want a voice. I ne'er was born, nor e'er can die. Then prithee tell me, what am I? The players argue about this for only very little time because Anna has sort of already figured it out. And finally, Tom has Boots say, art thou a mirror? And at that point, they hear this grinding sound. And the third panel of the obelisk, the three-sided structure in front, stone structure in front of them, there's a hidden compartment that they couldn't see. They didn't really search or inspect it. And it spins around and there's a large mirror on that side of the obelisk. The players at this point spend a couple of minutes because they have tricked themselves into thinking that there are two riddles instead of one riddle. I don't know why I broke it up like this. I wasn't trying to trick the players, but yeah, they assumed for a moment that there were two different riddles and that therefore there must be two answers. But at this point, they had already figured it out and gotten the answer, and they had gotten the portal to the next. The mirror is the portal to the next puzzle, and so I wasn't really inclined to make it easy for them and say, no, guys, there's only one riddle, because at the end of the day, if they wanted to spend time on this dead end, that's up to them. They'd already solved it. Several of the players wanted to read the text, and so I handed it to them and they passed it around. And when Phil got it, he read it and he goes, I think it's a reflection. And in fact, reflection is the correct answer, but according to the rules I was using, mirror would also be acceptable. They investigate this mirror and they discover that while it shows the maze that is opposite it, it does not reflect any of them. They cannot see themselves in the mirror, and by this means do I convey to them that this is an extraordinary object. They realize pretty quickly it's probably a portal, so Leech has Odie touch the mirror, and as he does so, he teleports out. Now, Leech has a telepathic connection to this creature, so unless I wanted to rule that the next stage of the adventure was in a different universe than the first stage, and it's not, they're in the same realm, then Leech can see through his imp's eyes. As far as I know, this is according to the rules. And so I describe the next part, which I'm going to save for a second. I describe the next puzzle to the players as described by Leech through Odie's eyes, but Odie's not able to interact with it. That was a ruling I made because the players are kind of trying to, shortcut past stuff and exploit minor abilities into game-breaking ways. And so, yeah, they're basically going to try and play the next puzzle using just the imp, and I wasn't inclined to let them. They're all going to have to progress together or fail together. Odie is unable to interact with anything he sees. It's like everything's an illusion. And so the players are left with little choice. They go through the mirror and they all end up in yet another world-looking place. It's a green hills forest in the distance, and at the top of one nearby hill, there is an angelic form sitting in front of what looks like a game board. He's sitting at a table, and on the table is a game board. The characters approach, and they see that the board, it's a large square board, and it is blank. And on the board are 9 pieces. The angelic being is a diva from the Monster Manual, and he is sitting there, and he's frustrated, trying to solve this problem. He cannot solve it. He describes it to the characters. He says, this is the game of centuries. I must plant 9 trees so they lie on 10 straight roads. There must be 3 trees on each road. I cannot remember the solution. It's driving me mad. Can you solve it? The idea here being that this diva is trapped here by someone else who came to battle the Lord of Madness, and the Lord of Madness trapped him with this puzzle. Or alternatively, this diva probably is an illusion of someone that the old one defeated. And so he's using the form to try to test these players and see if he can drive them mad. And the idea being that if the players can't solve the puzzle in a certain amount of time, the diva will go crazy and attack. And indeed, as the players talk about it and think about it, the diva gets progressively more frustrated, gets up and starts pacing. I go and get a miniature that I have of an actual angelic enemy and put it on the table. I turn and I grab a prop that I have, which is a whiteboard that we use here for planning stuff that I had wiped off. I put the whiteboard in the middle of the table with a marker and 9 pieces of tree terrain that the players are free to move around however they want. And they have to draw the lines, the 10 lines on the whiteboard. And Judge tries to draw all 10 lines, one over the other, and then realizes when he says, only three trees on each road, that this probably isn't going to work. And indeed, it does not work. You have to actually figure out the puzzle. It's not a trick. The players all open up their notebooks and they start making little graphs and maps, and they're drawing lines, and they're trying to figure out. This wasn't incredibly watchable, I don't think. I think I had sort of imagined that the players would use the whiteboard and the marker, and they would all be working out their solutions on the whiteboard. But of course, why would they do that? That would be I think, a lot more interesting for people viewing to watch. But the players all have pencils and notebooks. They can all make their own. They could work a lot faster that way. And indeed, this is what they do. And I had a timer running. And from the moment that I started the timer, which was probably a minute or two after the puzzle actually started, it only took them about 7.5 minutes to actually get the answer. So I don't even think they spent 10 minutes on it, which is, I think, pretty good considering that, considering how long these puzzles can take to solve. And I noticed I was thinking about giving them a hint if they needed one. And I had a couple of ideas of how to do that. But one of the things I noticed was they were all making grids. They were all making grids in their notebooks and then drawing lines. And I know what the solution is. And I'm like, a grid's kind of misleading. I mean, you could make a grid ultimately with enough, but they were all doing 3x3 grids. And so I was like, maybe I need to. And Lars almost got there. I think he almost had it at one point. But then as he was trying to translate it from his notebook to the thing, he got confused. And then Tom Schmuck went, I got it. And he drew it out. And he was right. There's probably more than one way to solve this, but he actually drew the solution that I had from the adventure. And instantly the players are transported to the third and sort of final puzzle. They're in a large square room. The walls are made of brimstone. It smells like sulfur in here. And there's a fire giant pacing back and forth between two scales. The fire giant has a bag full of boulders, and he's walking back and forth between these two scales, putting boulders on one side of each scale. On the other half of each scale are hellhound adults and hellhound pups. One scale has 4 adult hellhounds and 3 pups on one side. The other scale has 3 adult hellhounds and 4 pups on one side. And then he puts a stack of boulders on one, a stack of boulders on the other, and both scales balance. The giant scratches its head for a bit and then announces that the 4 hounds and 3 pups weigh as much as 37 boulders, while the 3 hounds and 4 pups weigh as much as 33 boulders. It needs to know how much does a hound weigh and how much does a pup weigh in boulders. Again, like the diva, it is trapped here. This puzzle is driving it crazy. It doesn't know the answer, and it asks the players to figure it out. And some of the players immediately kind of give up, and they're like, I'm not going to be able to figure this out. But even in the previous one with the trees, Phil, for instance, who was like, I'm never going to be able to solve this, as he saw how long it was taking, he's like, yeah, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. And he started trying to make it work. Suddenly, and I was quite surprised with how rapidly they came up with the answer. Lars just announces the answer, and he is exactly correct. And when asked, he's like, I basically brute forced it. I looked at the numbers. I came up with some approximate values. It looked like they were about right. And then when I realized I was only off by 1 or 2, I just tweaked them and got the right answer. A pup weighs 3 boulders and an adult weighs 7 boulders. The characters have essentially passed all 3 of the puzzle tests, and they find themselves in a large mansion, like explicitly a Riojan mansion, a manor house, multiple levels, stairs, doors. It's dark in here. It's lit by candlelight. There are doors out. There are windows. Outside the windows is only a dark fog. They can't see any detail. When they try to get out, the handles on the doors won't move. There are paintings of Riojan nobles on the walls. There are books and bookcases. But as the characters investigate this place, they discover that it has a strange unreality to it. They're unable to get the candles out of the candle holders. And when Slim goes to put one of the candles out, he can't do it. He goes to blow out one of the candles. Nothing happens. The flame doesn't even flicker in response to his breath. When they approach the paintings to see who did the house belong to, as they get close to the paintings, what was obviously a Riojan noble posing for his portrait kind of dissolves into just weird inky blobs. And there's no detail. There's no actual paint there. When they look at the tapestries on the walls or the rugs on the floor, they look as though they're very finely woven, but there's actually no texture to them. There's no fabric. It's almost like they were painted on the floor, and as you get close to them, all of the detail dissolves. There are books in the bookcases, and the books have titles on their spines, and it sort of looks like you can make out what they say from a certain distance, but as you get closer, all the words dissolve into just like scribbles, like painted by a child on the side of on the spine of the book. Slim takes, or Leech takes one of the books off the bookcase. It's a real physical object. He opens it it up. It has pages. The pages are all blank. The characters investigate this mansion. They go upstairs. They explore the downstairs. They find a couple of different rooms. They're all empty. They finally come to a study, a room that has people in it. It's a long, narrow room, and there's a table in the middle of it. There are bookcases on the walls, and sitting at this card table are three figures playing a game of cards. The three figures, and I went and we got the miniatures of the characters. The three figures are Red, the original commander of the chain, Nails, the original staff sorcerer, and Sweet, the former lieutenant and former commander. Seeing this, the characters enter the room and they notice that there's this strange red slime on the bookcases, on two of the bookcases, and that the far side of the room is shrouded in darkness. And the characters, as soon as they walk in, the characters at the table, the three people they know, get up and approach them and start saying cryptic things. Sweet says, "We've been waiting for you." Red says, "Why did you leave us behind?" And then Nail says, "You're in great danger. You've got to get out of here quickly. Take this," and goes to hand the players a wand. Judge immediately thinks, "Do not touch that wand." But Leech, who's new to all this adventuring stuff, walks up and grabs the wand, and now it's initiative. Because of the initiative results that I got, the bad guys all acted after all of the heroes. And that, I think, had a big impact on the difficulty of this battle, because since the bad guy, I decided that the bad guy's special abilities or persistent effects weren't on yet, and they wouldn't turn on until the bad guy's turns, the players were all able to get their characters into position. And as a result, some of the terrain changing effects, some of the area effect, there are two gibbering mouthers on the walls, and their psychic abilities hadn't turned on yet, and that made the battle a lot more straightforward than I had imagined it. The characters see that there are these thin tendrils that stretch from each of the figures that they know, the characters they know, into the darkness of the room in the back. And as they follow the tendrils, they try to break the tendrils. The tendrils are invulnerable. They cannot be broken. And attacking them causes great pain to Nails and Sweet and Red. And as they go to the back of the room, they see this giant gelatinous, pulsing, blood red ooze with skulls in it. It's an Elder Oblex from, I believe, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. It has reached into their memories and created simulacrums of the people that they know. The players were able to flank the Oblex, and Slim, especially with his greatsword and action surge and getting 2 attacks per round, is able to just annihilate this thing. I think he did like 70 points of damage in 1 round, such that I had to monkey with the Oblex's hit points just so it would have an action, and that this is classic DMing, right? I didn't need to fudge the die rolls. I just made it so that the Oblex had a lot more hit points, still within the legal range of the Oblex's hit points. In fact, I played in D&D for many years. Some of the best D&D I ever played in, the Dungeon Master just told us from the beginning, all bad guys have max hit points. And so I always have that in the back of my head, that's sort of a difficulty level of D&D. And that's when I busted out here. I gave the Oblex the hit points that needed to at least get 1 round so that the battle wouldn't be ridiculously anticlimactic. The Oblex finally gets its turn. It gets 2 pseudopod attacks. It does a colossal amount of damage to 2 of the characters. I think it critted Slim. And then it used its Memory Eater ability on Boots, and Boots failed the saving throw. The DC for it's ridiculously high. It's like Wisdom 18. This is a very powerful bad guy, by the way. But in spite of what happens with a very powerful bad guy like this in this situation, the specific encounter design, is that if it goes, the players aren't going to have any problem killing it. But if it goes, it's going to do devastating things on its turn. It didn't kill Slim, although it came close. Slim has like 70 hit points. It did a lot of damage to Slim. It did a lot of damage to, I think, Judge or Boots with a slam. And then the Memory Eater ability hits. And I was at the point now where I'm like, I'm not even going to bother rolling damage. It's so many dice, and I'm tired of doing the math. I'm just going to use the average here. And this is something you learn, is that the more dice you're rolling, like I used to play Champions, and it would be not unusual for you to roll 18 dice at once. The odds of you rolling much outside the median are pretty small. Like, what are the odds on 18 dice? You're going to roll all 1s or all 6s, for instance. So here I felt perfectly legitimate to just take the average, which was a lot of damage, and then Boots had his memory eaten. He does not remember the lessons, his time in the Bardic College. Somebody in chat said, so is he back to being a duelist now? Which I thought was funny. And the effect is just of Bane, where you get a D4 that you have to add. I gave him an Obsidian D4 and said, until you fix this, you have to get to roll this on all your attack rolls and all your ability checks. which Tom had a lot of fun when he went down. Tom immediately, Boots goes down, and Leech uses his, chief surgeon ability, which is a title he gets that I gave him for being an officer in the chain. He immediately gets a reaction. He gets to move to Boots. If he reaches Boots and is adjacent to him, Boots can spend a hit die. Boots comes back up, and Boots says, "Thanks. Who are you?" And Tom had a lot of fun role playing. I don't remember any of you. That was a lot of fun. The players, having already done a stupid amount of damage just in the first round of combat, in the second round of combat, they're able to finish off the Oblex. They're able to kill the gibbering mouthers quite easily, and that ends this encounter. And in fact, when they realize, oh wait, this was just a room. This was just a room with a weird alien creature in it that is, like parasitic, living inside the mind of the old one. The players, it was a little bit anticlimactic. That was perhaps not the best encounter design. We'll talk about that in the after action report. And Tom playing Copper was like, I guess that was it. There's no payoff there. We just keep exploring. They go to the solarium, which is this like small ornate greenhouse type thing adjacent to the manor house. And they see there's a large pool in the solarium. It's the baths. And the pool it's a natural bath formation. So there's like natural stone and bubbling water, a lit blue from below, blue glow throughout the whole room, casting everything in negative shadows. And there's a table with like a parasol, exactly what you would expect to find in a stately manor. And at the table, there are two chairs. On the table, there are cakes and tea. And there are two figures. One is trying to offer tea to the other. One of the figures is a woman in dress. They can only tell this because she's in a dress. Otherwise, her body is dead and rotting. It is actually a corpse of a woman. And sitting opposite her is an undead man in Riojan nobility and wearing a crown that appears to match the crown of House Valletta. And he is offering the woman tea, and she's not accepting it. The characters can see all this through a window. And at that point, it was 10:45. And I said, and that's where we'll end it. And they're like, oh, because they wanted to go and interact with this thing and see if they could get the crown and finish this adventure. So I thought that was a good stopping point. But also, I didn't want them necessarily to go into the room because they're going to need to rest before this. This is a pretty epic encounter. So that was the session. I thought it was pretty fun. I would rank it as like a second order session. There are some sessions that afterwards, I just feel like everything went right. That's exactly how I expected things to go. And then there are also sessions where I'm like, oh, this didn't seem to work. The juice wasn't flowing, however you want to describe it. I wasn't on. And this was like a second order session. There were certainly some bits where I felt like this could have gone better. Mostly the encounter with the Oblex at the end, because I honestly didn't expect the players to get that far. So I didn't have all of the Oblex's abilities and the gibbering mouthers abilities all in my head. I had to reference them and read them, and that slowed things down. And I wasn't able to coordinate things. And I think the problem was totally typical, happens to me all the time when I'm designing stuff on the fly like this. I'll spend a couple of days designing the next 3 or 4 sessions worth of encounters and adventure, and the players play through it, but they're only playing through my first draft. It's only my first draft. So some things go well. And I think all the puzzles went well. I thought the battle with the Dwargar went well. I forgot about Korsoth Vastican. That killed me. That was the reason I wanted to run that battle. I loved the idea of them summoning the Form Killer and fighting a creature from Strongholds and Followers. But they didn't know that I'd forgotten something. They had a great time fighting the Dwargar. They had a great time with the puzzles. We'll talk about that in a second. But the Oblex encounter was really, it didn't lack drama because it was, who are these characters? This is interesting. What's going on? There was this, are we gonna ... question mark. That part worked fine. There was just very little payoff. So I think in a second draft, I would probably maybe draw the room differently, make it so the gibbering mouthers are more effective. Also, maybe make it so that the 3 figures playing cards, it's not as clear that they are obviously not the people that they know. I don't know what I could have done there. It would have been pretty hard to trick the players given the circumstances they were under. But yeah, generally speaking, I think that the Oblex and the gibbering mouthers all going last, and the general lack of coordination between their different abilities made it so that the players were able to deal with it really quickly. And again, I think there should have been some payoff. There should have been some consequences. Beating this thing should have unlocked something. In fact, I think it would have been cool if beating this had unlocked an NPC, somebody who was trapped in here that was now free thanks to the players killing the Oblex, and that was a real person from a real world. Maybe not the mundane world the players are coming from, but maybe. So that's sort of the lesson here is that there are limits to my ability to design an adventure in a first draft that will engage the players as well as an adventure that I've run several times and play tested and had a lot of experience with. And this entire campaign so far has been me kind of making up the content as we went. And I'll have 3 or 4 sessions worth of stuff ready. And while the players are playing through that, I'm prepping the next stuff. And that's, I think, it's worked a lot better than I thought it was going to work, because I don't normally run D&D like this. I normally run from adventures. And there will be a point in Capital, I think, where the players will discover a big, epic sort of mega dungeon that they're going to explore, which I'm looking forward to. And that's where I'm normally more comfortable. I find my time is better spent taking someone else's play-tested, polished product and customizing it for my world and my play style and my players. And that is the ultimate adventure. Otherwise, something like this Oblex encounter probably going to need 1 or 2 more revisions. Probably it won't be the next group that goes through it. It'll be the group after that where it really feels polished. The puzzles I felt were a huge hit. And I say that in spite of the fact that I know not all the players were equally engaged. Like, I don't think there was ever a point where Phil, for instance, or even really Matt O'Driscoll, was genuinely excited to be solving one of these puzzles. But in spite of that, I don't think either of them were put out by it. None of the puzzles took so long or were so frustrating or so unsolvable that people started to kind of get antsy or impatient or disgusted. And furthermore, and you never know about this, because this is down to group by group on a player by player basis, I was challenging the players. I was explicitly challenging the players. I think that's a big part of D&D. I think it's a big part of that puzzle riddle style of play. This is not something where you can just roll a die and get the answer, which, by the way, that's true of combat too. You can't just decide, isn't my character a much better fighter than me? Can't I just roll my combat knowledge or make a combat training roll and solve this entire battle with one roll? No, you're going to have to actually tactics it out. And yeah, your character might have better tactics than your player, but it's the player who is the one being challenged in all instances. So I wouldn't have surprised me if the players had said, this sucks. My character could certainly figure this out. It's stupid that I can't. Or that I'm being punished for not being able to figure it out. They never did that. And part of that was the fact that they got the answers. These riddles, even if they thought, oh, this is going to be a pain in the butt, when they started trying to figure it out, they got the answers. And some of the players evidently really liked it. They really liked that kind of puzzle gameplay. And again, it's just down to style. These puzzles are from an adventure that I played through as a player, not a dungeon master, called The Crypt of Lysandred the Mad, which you can get on the DM's Guild, and which my friends and I quite liked. And there's like 50 puzzles like this in there. There are word games and all sorts of math problems and stuff and logic puzzles. Lars said, oh, I guess we're playing Professor Layton. I loved Professor Layton. I played those games. I thought they were a huge hoot and a lot of fun, and some of the most fun I had playing on my DS. So this is very much like a funhouse dungeon. And funhouse dungeons have a reputation for being frivolous, but I felt like I believed that if I contextualized it correctly, right, an insane demigod, otherworldly aboleth who is trying to trap these characters in puzzles and games and make them play the games over and over again, my players would accept that context. And so this riddle style of play would be plausible, and it seemed like it worked. When Lars solved the final puzzle, I was like, this really worked. It didn't take anywhere near as long as I thought it would. I for some reason, it's been 20 years since I played through Crypt of Lysandred the Mad, and my players, my friends and I, we probably got through like 15 of these puzzles in one night, maybe more. We might have gotten through all of them, I don't know. And we might have gotten through all of them, and there's a ton of them. So I should have known better. I should have realized it's probably going to take, like, on average, 5 to 10 minutes, 7 minutes to get through one of these. So it's not going to take 45 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. But when I realized that 3 different players had solved the puzzles, and it wasn't just one player that everyone was just waiting for okay, well, let's just sit here and, like, when Anna got the first one out of the gate, I went, uh-oh. What if Anna's the only one that likes these? And what if everyone just sits around waiting for Anna to either succeed or fail? There are failure conditions. There's a mirror of life trapping, which would trap one of the characters, and they would be out for the rest of the adventure. They would be out until they got the crown of Valletta. And I told the players ahead of time, bring a book or bring your Switch, because you may end up out of the game for the rest of the evening. And they were like, okay, that's cool. Thanks for letting us know. And they imagined it might be banishment. There was a couple of attempts at banishment in the battle with the Darrow. And I wanted to banish King because I had a whole cool thing where he was going to go back to Capital and he was going to be banished back to a church, a Higaran church, not a church of one of his saints, but a church of a saint from his region of the world. And there was going to be a little role playing and they were going to send him back. And I thought there was going to be a cool seed for Lars, but he very wisely was never in line of sight of the creature that could banish. And so as a result, that never happened. But it wasn't banished that they needed to worry about. It was the Mirror of Life trapping. So when Anna got that right out of the gate, I was like, oh no, is this just going to be Anna has fun and Anna solves all these and there's no real challenge and the other players are just frustrated? Nope. Anna solved one of them and Phil also worked at it and got the real quote unquote answer. Tom Schmuck solved the other one. Lars solved the third one. So that made me happy. And I picked them on purpose because one of them was spatial drawing. One of them was language, riddle. One of them was math. My friends and I, we love those kind of puzzles. We were all computer science, physics, chemistry nerds. And my entire group was made up of kids like that when we were in our 20s. And I was a little worried that now I play with a bunch of artists and producers and that they might not have that same kind of, I want to do an algebra puzzle. But even though I don't know that Lars would have said, yeah, I want to sign up to do algebra puzzles, he figured it out. So that was hugely rewarding for me to see them having fun and figuring it out, not getting frustrated, engaging with the content. So I think that part was a success. I do feel super let down by the Oblex encounter. But like I said, first draft, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't spring a second draft on my players. I can only spring first drafts on them. I was once in archery in college and my the archery instructor said, your second arrow is always your best shot. And I'm like, I just got to figure out how to start with my second arrow. And she laughed. So it worked as a joke. So that was pretty successful except for the Oblex. I had a map of the manor house on my computer and I spent a lot of time looking for it and finding one that I thought was appropriate. And I thought about printing it out. But again, I thought this was going to be a red herring. If I put a map in front of them, they're going to want to explore all the rooms in the map. Or if I draw the foyer on the tactical board, they're going to want to make a version of and we'll go through the whole rigmarole of exploring the dungeon. And I thought, nope, there's only 2 encounters in here. There are dozens of rooms. That would be a red herring. Let's just get to the action. So that worked, by the way. Eschewing the map and saying you explore the room, you find this, that, and then you come upon this one room that's different from all the others. That worked. But I am starting to get a little frustrated with the players not having maps of the places that they are, because it robs them of a certain degree of choice and interactivity. In this instance, it's fine, but it makes me think of when we go back to Capital, I'm definitely going to need to start working on more detailed maps of Capital so the players can interact with it and it'll start feeling like a real city. I just go back to when I was a kid. I think we were 18 when my friend Brad ran his Greyhawk game. We started at 0 level. There were rules for starting at 0 level, which were quite good. I'd like to see those rejuvenated and reused for 5th edition. And he just put the map of Greyhawk, which he was using from Mayfair Games' edition, which was a 2nd or 3rd edition of City State of the Invincible Overlord. He put this huge map of this massive fantasy city in front of us and said, okay, where do you want to go? And that was amazing. That was hugely empowering for us as players. It was a lot of fun. I wish I could do the same thing for Capital, but I don't have a map of Capital. And it would take me probably months of us not seeing each other for me to get something like that done. There's a good justification for not providing the players a map like that, and that is they don't have a map. They literally do not have this map. They can't just go to a 7-Eleven and buy a map of the city that doesn't exist. They might be able to find somebody that could give them a map, but they haven't done that yet. So I don't feel as though I am letting them down in any way in terms of the justification. You have to see things through their characters' eyes. The characters do not have a map, but gosh, they would have a lot of fun, I think, if I could put a map in front of them. So that is the lesson from the Manor House, is I think it worked for the Manor House. There are only 2 encounters. They dealt with the first one. They have found the second one. If they beat that, the adventure's over. But I do feel like when we go back to Capital, we're going to need a map. That's it, folks. If I were grading sessions in terms of the best sessions that leave me just super jazzed and then the worst sessions that leave me frustrated, this is definitely a second order session where I think it went pretty well. The stuff I was most worried about was a hit, the puzzle, and stuff that I thought wasn't going to be that big a deal turned out to be kind of problematic, and that was the Obelix encounter. But, these things happen. Even the most successful sessions that I run, I come away from thinking there are things I could have done better. So by no means, you're always going to get the after action report where we talk about what I think could have been done better, regardless of how good it is. Don't think that my natural artist desire to improve and be better in some way is a sign that there's a problem with the campaign. I don't think there's a problem with the campaign. I think things are going incredibly well. We've had a crazy amount of different things happen so far in only 12 sessions. The players have gone through this extended cinematic at the beginning with the fall of Black Bottom that sets everything up. That's one trick I like to deploy. I think that worked pretty well. The players did a skill challenge. The players got to the Astral Sea. The players were in another universe for a while. They saw the dead god, the waiting god. They did all sorts of, there was the Changeling. There was the Somnian Tenebris. They've done a ton of different things. They got to Capital in a very small amount of time. A bunch of dope stuff has happened. And so of many different styles, and this puzzle funhouse dungeon thing is just one more style on top of that. This may turn into one of the campaigns I'm proudest of. The jury's out yet. It's a lot better than a lot of campaigns I've run. There's only 3 times in my life, I think, that I have run a campaign. We played every week for 3 years, and it was a huge hit, and it stayed with us for years, and we talked about it for years. There's no way of knowing whether or not this is going to be the 4th of those games, but so far it's going pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. Let's see what happens next week. Next week might be the last time we get to play with Matt O'Driscoll, but I'm going to ask the other players how they feel and see if we can maybe add him as a player. It's going to be up to the players, really. It's going to be up to them. I'm going to ask each of them offline because I want them to be free. Don't ask somebody a question if you need them to say yes, because they might say no. And then what? So I'm going to ask the players offline individually. And if anybody says, no, there's just too many people and I don't feel like I'd get enough time, I feel like there's already too many people at the table or something like that, I'm going to respect that. And we'll see what happens. So he may be staying with the group. He may level up or we may go back to 5 players. We may need a bigger table. So until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for staying tuned through all this nonsense. If you like these videos, the campaign diaries are by far the least popular videos that we make. If you like, according to YouTube, if you like these videos, please come by our store, pick up a copy of Strongholds and Followers. There's a bunch of dope stuff in it I think you will like. It's not only is it fun to read, there's some amazing art in it, a bunch of cool monsters, and a whole bunch of new systems you can add, including things like spell hacking you can add to your game that we're really proud of. There is a Kickstarter coming for the sequel to this, Kingdoms, Organizations, and Warfare, with a whole bunch of more cool stuff and updates to some of the things in the first book. There's a link in the doobly-doo to a website you can go to. You give us your email, and you will get an alert when the Kickstarter goes live so that you will not miss it. We're going to have new miniatures and all sorts of cool stuff we're working on right now. We're excited to show you. Until then, till next time, peace out.